All right, welcome to Classical Theology. I am excited to have my first interview and with one of my best friends on what I think is a fun topic, which is the question of Bigfoot. What is Bigfoot? Does Bigfoot exist? What should Christians think about Bigfoot? And so I'd like to welcome my friend, Dr. Doug Potter, who is one of the professors at our school, Southern Evangelical Seminary. He is the director of the Doctor of Ministry program, and he has a YouTube channel himself. What is your channel called? I know it's called Doug Potter.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. It's called Doug Potter something. If people want to find it, they could probably just search on YouTube for Doug Potter and type theology or apologetics after that.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything you want to tell the audience about yourself or what you're doing, what you're working on, anything you want them to know?
Yeah, not really. It's great to be with you, Dr. Huffling. Can I call you Brian? I hope that's
please.
okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm just working like everybody else. I have a day job and keeping busy. And, of course, I teach at the seminary and I'm prepping for the fall really hard. So that's pretty much what I'm involved in.
What classes do you teach at the school?
I teach. Yeah, it's okay. I teach mostly theology, and I'll be teaching a new class this fall in theological communication. So I'm really looking forward to that.
All right,
it'll be really fun. Yeah.
Well, people might be wondering why on earth are we having a talk on Bigfoot on a theology channel? And if you've seen my channel, you know there's a lot of UFO stuff on there as well. In fact, Doug was one of the ones who got me into UFOs somewhat. And the question is in my own personal UFO studies, I see Bigfoot come up a lot. In doing research on Skinwalker Ranch here recently, reading some books on that and doing just regular studies on UFOs, other weird stuff chimes up a lot, like poltergeist type activity, Bigfoot. And there is a contingency of people who think that Bigfoot actually is some kind of a paranormal activity going on alongside these UFOs. Other non-Christians say this even come up in the book I'm reading, Skinwalkers in the Pentagon. So anything you want to add to why or how the study of Bigfoot relates to theology or why Christians should even care about it?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure every Christian should really care about it. It kind of falls into the category of legend or some would say fables, and I'm not sure everyone needs to be concerned about it. But I think you did point some things out that are important. Number one, it can be a leadway into further things that may be involved in the occult. So that's obviously related to theology. There's also a question about it, a mystery about it. And of course, God created a world with human beings on it and created a world that is to satisfy their intellectual curiosity in terms of them growing to discover knowledge. And in this sense, I think the issue of is Bigfoot, at least part of the question, is Bigfoot real? Is it a real animal that exists? Is certainly related to that question. So to a certain extent, that question ought to at least be asked and investigated to a certain level, and is therefore, of course, related to creation. And since God created creation, it's related to that. That's about as far as I can go with regards to relating it to the topic of theology.
Okay.
So forth.
All right. So I've never really gotten into Bigfoot before meeting you and studying UFOs. It's very interesting. I've come to have more of an interest in it, both because of you and my own readings in UFOs and that kind of thing. What got you into it?
Well, I hope I'm not a bad influence on you if I hooked you on UFOs and Bigfoot.
You know, you're making a good point here. I see a pattern.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, how did I get into? Well, I grew up in the 80s, like a lot of people, and there's, during that time period, there's a lot left over from some things that went on in the 60s and 70s that appears in various shows, appears in various documentaries. So that was very influential on me because every time those shows came on, they usually dealt with at least three things like Bigfoot, UFOs, and the Loch Ness Monster. So that was obviously sparked a curiosity in me, but I grew older and kind of away from that. But believe it or not, I went on a camping trip in eastern Ohio on some private land of which I had permission to be on. I was not alone. And in the middle of the night, we just ran into this horrific sound in the woods, the likes of which I've never heard of before, and didn't know what it was. We asked some locals about it, and without batting an eye, they said, "That's Bigfoot." And I thought, there is no way.
Wow.
Even if that exists, it's out in the Pacific Northwest, not Eastern Ohio. So I just kind of put it aside, but the experience was quite an experience in terms of at least hearing. I didn't see anything. I just heard something very close and very loud and a siren type scream. It, obviously being out in the woods all alone like that, kind of shocked and scared us a little bit. So I kind of kept that in the back of my mind. And long and behold, when they had bookstores in the 90s, was wandering around a bookstore looking actually in the occult section in a bookstore because I was at the time getting ready to or studying in seminary and Christian apologetics and was into cult and counter cult research and things like that. Happened upon this book by um, called Big Footprints by Grover Krantz. And Grover Krantz wrote this book in the 90s. I got to it in the late 90s. And I said, hey, here's actually a scientist, an anthropologist, and he's actually trying to make a scientific case for this creature being real. And I said, hey, I need some light reading on the side. Let me take a stab at it. And I read it and kind of walked away from the book with three things in the book that really sparked my interest, kind of at least put me on the fence with regards to the issue, saying, hey, if he's really right about these three things, and I'll tell you what they are in just a minute, maybe he's got something with regards to this creature actually being real. And the three things that really sparked my interest, or at least intrigued me a little bit, that put me on the fence with regards to the issue, had to do with what's called Cripplefoot, which is actually a print that was found in Washington State that kind of just has this deformity to it that it seemed in all likelihood no one would really want to fake this or even be able to fake this and get it right if they're going around faking Bigfoot tracks or something like that. The second thing is he had these mathematical equations. I'm not real good with math, but I was impressed by it with regards to how he can actually reconstruct the bone structure based on a print, just a print and a cast made of the print. He said that he could actually reconstruct the bone structure, which seemed to eliminate the possibility that from a cast, you could reconstruct the bone structure. You're not talking about fake feet being used. You're talking about bones needing to be there, which implies a animal type creature, obviously, and not a hoaxer. And I said, boy, if he can do that, that's something. And then the third thing I didn't really like very much at all, but he had two things he withheld in the book from portraying to his reader or even letting out, because they were the two things that you could not hoax. And those two things he didn't tell anybody about because he kept them because if they were things that he could use to authenticate real tracks versus fake tracks. If he let it out, he thought that they could be faked, and someone couldn't, and then he wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So those three things interested me. After that, I actually read another book. I was looking for, hey, I read the scientific case, the scientist that believes in it, so to speak, or at least advocates for it to some extent. And then I said, at some point, I got to read the other side. I got to read the skeptic. So I found a little bit later, around early 2000s, Dave Daegling's book called Bigfoot Exposed. And it is a tour de force, I would say, in terms of looking at the history of the movement and looking at the background. And he took on in my mind, very successfully, Krantz's 3 points that put me on the fence and completely demolished them. And so from then on, I said, wow, that's really something. I've read a few more books we might get into after that, but not much more. So that's really where I stand with regards to this issue and why I got into it.
Okay, well, cool. Yeah, you mentioned that you didn't think it would be in Ohio. I mean, I'm from the Southeast. I certainly didn't think it would be in the Southeast, but there's a lot of places that where there are supposed sightings. I'm in Georgia, and in North Georgia, there's actually a museum because there's supposed to be a lot of sightings there. So that was interesting. So is this a worldwide phenomena?
Well, some would say yes. I can't say that I've looked into the worldwide aspect of it, but some would say that just about every culture, at least I've read this, has stories of wild men or beasts that are bipedal, that live in the woods that they have come into contact with. So in many countries, yeah, you do have these stories going back.
Hmm.
You do have it here in North America as well. So I don't know. I don't know that I've done the work to say every culture going back has it, but many do.
Are when you use the term Bigfoot and Sasquatch and Yeti, are those interchangeable or are they different?
Yeah, well, Bigfoot normally is the term that's been coined for the alleged creature in the Pacific Northwest and in parts of Canada as well. And as you say, even across parts of the United States, it's been seen. They do have, even in the United States, different names for it, and even in Canada, different names, but Bigfoot is at least the popular name for it. When you get into things like Yeti and the Himalayas and over in Asia, a different name, a little bit different eyewitness description of the creature. So it's people advocates for Bigfoot do think we're talking about some differences.
Okay. You touched on this a little bit, but the question then is this an important issue for Christians? You've already mentioned maybe, maybe not, depending on, what you're interested in, whatever. So should Christians be interested in this? Why or why not?
Yeah, kind of need to give you some background with regards to that, at least how I
Okay.
kind of have approached it. Already talked about my experience. Um, there's at least, and we've already kind of touched on this. There's at least two things. My area of interest and teaching and so forth, of course, is related to apologetics and theology. So that's how I tend to look at everything. And believe it or not, and this is kind of show the level of I'm kind of a geek when it comes to apologetics. I was actually reading through some books several years ago on the resurrection of Jesus, and believe it or not, one of the books in a debate between William Lane Craig and Gerd Ludemann. This is not in the debate. If you look the debate up on YouTube, I'm sure it's out there. You're not going to find this. You've got to read the book, because what they did is they transcribed the debate and asked some scholars to interact with the debate going on. And one of those scholars, Michael Golder, in his reaction to the debate, actually brings up the issue of Bigfoot and assigns it, and actually brings up UFOs. You might be interested in that part of it, as the issue of collective delusion. And he actually assigns some of the secondary accounts of the resurrection of Jesus to be related to collective delusion, and tries to say that they're very much like this North American so-called monster and UFOs and things like that. So actually was brought up in a response to a Christian debate. The other area, which we've kind of touched on, is the issue of the connection with the occult. I think it's pretty clear now, based on my survey of YouTube type stuff that's out there, internet type stuff that's out there, and people that are in the culture. We'll probably need to talk about this, the culture, the Bigfoot culture. Some of these people are clearly involved in the occult. Some of them advocate to be Christians who are involved in Bigfoot and can easily be drawn into the occult as well, or drawn into it for various reasons. And so this is probably, from my angle, one of the more concerning issues with regards to this whole issue, where I think that it should be addressed in certain contexts, because Christians can be deceived and drawn into occultic beliefs, starting with kind of the gateway into Bigfoot. And of course, you've seen with regards to UFOs too, as well.
Right. All right. So one of the questions that I have had in talking with you and just thinking about this and reading about it when it comes up in my own personal reading is, why do people believe in Bigfoot? So why would you say, what are some of the better arguments, and why do people believe in it?
Yeah, I kind of like to start by dissecting, or at least discussing, excuse me, the term believe. because I think oftentimes, at least how I use it and understand the term, is not really well carried by a lot of even Christians in terms of how that term is used. In fact, if you read some of the literature on it, some of the books of the individuals that I've mentioned, they'll talk about individuals who, quote unquote, believe in Bigfoot, and they use that in a religious sense of believing something without evidence. They really want to distance themselves from the use of that because they think there is evidence for it, and they don't really have another term to use, so they kind of have to qualify it. I'm going to qualify the term in the sense that the term believe should be used when you don't have a direct demonstration that is appropriate to the subject of study of the truth of the object that's you're trying to investigate or trying to study. You can't actually demonstrate its truth, and therefore you have to resort in holding that something is true based, one, on the authority of another because they are an eyewitness to it or they give testimony to it or something like that. That's a kind of belief. Or based on the evidence that's been collected that you may or may not have direct access to, but other people have analyzed it and come to a conclusion. And in that sense, you can use the term believe in Bigfoot. I always like to clarify that or qualify that. Obviously, just to give you a counter distinction to that, if someone actually does see the creature, the animal, so to speak, directly, has a clear vision, sound of it, and they're certain about it with regards to it, then they don't have to say they believe in it. They actually have direct knowledge of it. They certainly still have a lot of questions about it, maybe some uncertainty about the experience or what they saw and so forth, but they're not in the category of actually believing it. If in fact, the creature does exist and someone sees it, they have a direct knowledge of it, and they don't exercise belief in the way that I've described it here. I kind of like to at least clarify that. Now, kind of back to your original question, why do people actually believe in it? Is because it's something that is actually one side of it puts forward, like the Grover Krantz side puts forth evidence that people can read and analyze, or they watch a documentary on it, or they watch a TV show on it. It's a very romantic, intriguing, involved idea. So they're drawn to it, and they therefore the fact that they believe it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of it has to do with UFOs too, and with the being drawn toward it and being kind of intrigued by it, and everything. So, what are some of the best arguments or reasons that people give forward? So people, they see it, like you mentioned. Anthropologists give other reasons or arguments for it. What are some of those reasons? Like, you've been researching this for a while. What are some of the best arguments you've seen in favor of it?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say I've been researching it all that long or all that in depthly, but I've mentioned some books before, and I'll mention two books that if for whatever reason your viewers are intriguing and knowing more, I'll recommend these two books. I've already mentioned one of them, but if they're interested in more, I would caution your listeners, your viewers, to not base their conclusion on television shows, which are purely oriented towards entertainment and attracting viewers.
Right.
Or even documentaries, I don't think is a good way to go. But I think that sticking to scientists that either write for or against this is the way to go. The one scientist that I would say that kind of has taken the mantle of Grover Krantz, who I mentioned before, is Dr. Jeff Meldrum. And his work on this, his book, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, advocates for it. I'll have a little bit to say about that book as we go along, I think. And the other one I've already mentioned is Dave Daengling's book, A Bigfoot Exposed, is a scientist that critiques. One of the things that's put out there that just isn't true is this saying that, scientists haven't looked at the evidence, scientists haven't investigated it, scientists, and if they did, they would come to the conclusion that, hey, it's worth investigating more. No, Dave Daegling has done a very thorough job of analyzing the history of the movement, the culture of the movement, doing investigative type reporting, having sources lined up and so forth. And as his book says, exposing a lot which is often not found in the TV shows, documentaries, and even some of the popular literature. And a lot of the books
an anthropologist. What is his
yes,
area?
Both these men are professors at various schools. Dave Daegling is at Florida State University, I believe. Dr. Jeff Meldrum is at Idaho State University. They both teach in the area of anthropology and have specializations that would, obviously relate if such a creature did exist. So, kind of back to your original question, what is the evidence? What can we say, at least briefly, put out in this kind of context, for and against with regards to it? And kind of let me set up at least 7 things that are popularly brought forward and analyzed when this question is ever brought up. And I'll try to give you the pro of something, and I'll try to give you the con of something. But in this context, I really can't go that deep into it, or at least I don't think people have the patience for me to do something like that. So I really would defer to the books for a more in-depth analysis for sure, if for whatever reason someone really has to dig into this.
Yeah, I'll put those in the description too for you for links.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so the first thing is this Native American tradition that's been around for quite some time. Advocates will point to the fact that, hey, you can actually have masks that appear to at least come close to the shape of gorilla monkey type masks. There you can see cave drawings that approximate very large bipedal hairy animal. And this is, and of course, you've got the legends, the traditions. If you talk to the elders that have been passed down for years and years and years, and they say, look, and this Bigfoot is even put along lines of known creatures to exist in their list of creatures. So this is put forward as evidence with regards to it existing. Now, the contrary to that is they have lots of legends and stuff that isn't true about animals and so forth in their listing of things. One of the things that could actually be put forward that I think has some legitimacy of where it may have been grounded in reality is the fact that scientists will tell you that ancient modern humans existed with hominid type creatures, animals that walked around bipedally, and it's known that they came in contact, actually interbred with some of them. Talk about Neanderthals, Denisovans, and there's a few others that are looked at as contemporaneous with modern humans. Certainly stories could arise from these type creatures with certain tribal groups and be passed down and looked at as legendary, and that might be a real source for this as well. So that's one thing, and I've kind of given you the pro and cons of that type of thing as well. The second thing is this notion of Gigantopithecus, which is a real giant ape that was discovered in Asia, and we only have teeth and part of a jawbone, but they have actually been able to reconstruct and to get DNA and a lot from that, and they've discovered that in all likelihood we're talking about something based on the jaw position and actually what is on the teeth, what the teeth are like, that it was in all likelihood bipedal, and it was of great size. We're talking about something that they can only estimate, something that may be 8, 9 or so feet tall. And this, of course, did exist in Asia, went extinct hundreds of thousands of years ago, of course. But the argument is put forward that this looks like a good ancestor for something that might exist today that people have experienced that we know as Bigfoot, because, of course, it could have come across at the right time. The land bridge that connected Russia and Alaska could have come over that way. And we know that there are other possibility of animals that came over and so forth, and maybe it ended up populating North America that way. The counter to something like this is something along the lines of the fossil record. I go, look, there are lots of creatures. There's actually very small primate creatures. When you look at just North American fossils, of large creatures, small creatures. The fossil record is very diverse of a lot of creatures that have gone extinct. Some very large, even as I mentioned, very small squirrel-sized type primates in North America that don't exist anymore. They've gone extinct. And where's the Sasquatch? If we've got these other primates, this creature, if it's real, just didn't pop out of existence in the pop into existence in the 1960s. It's got to have a history, a long history of its existence, and there's just nothing in the fossil record. So this is put forward to obviously counter that. And even if the fossil record is a small sample, I think the burden of proof is on the advocates of Bigfoot to point to something in the fossil record to represent it, and because it's just it necessitates that before we put forward this notion that it really does exist. Third thing would be what everybody likes to look at is the photographic evidence, and probably we can maybe talk more in depthly about this in a little bit. But what I call the PG film, the Patterson-Gimlin film, which was filmed by Roger Patterson in October of 1967. That is still put forward, and even though it's been analyzed quite a bit, but it's still put forward as the most prominent evidence, photographic evidence for the existence of the creature. But I think, at least in today's light, in today's world, it's going to be really, really hard. And given the culture of Bigfoot, it's going to be really hard to prove the existence of Bigfoot based on anything photographic. There are many, many fakes out there, known fakes, presumed fakes that are out there. And so I don't think you're going to get anything definitive. So any scientist is basically going to say, with all these fakes, with the culture of Bigfoot that's out there, we're not going to accept any photographic evidence for it. I used to think there would be an exception to that. For example, if you could get some just raw, very clear, wildlife-like footage of it that has like a family, there's something that's extremely hard to fake, that they don't know they're being watched or being videoed, that at least would perk their interest, some scientific interest. But I'll tell you, with all the AI, CIG stuff that's out there today, I don't think that's going to do it at all. So this is definitely not definitive, and I don't think any photographic evidence is going to be accepted by the scientific community in today's environment. Now, the fourth thing has to do with eyewitness accounts. There's no doubt you can go to websites. I'll give you one that you can link in the description as well, of collection of just thousands of eyewitness sightings throughout the North America. There's a lot. There's no doubt about it. But one of the things to point out and counter to that is there's really not a lot of scientific criterion that has been used to collect this, and not a lot of investigation of each one of these individually. There's a way to report it, but there's not a lot of scientific investigating, scientific calculating, and scientific ways to eliminate the stuff that's just completely bogus. And so, and it's also the case that actually some scientific studies have been done that kind of correlate Sasquatch sightings with black bear, and it may include brown bear sightings in North America, that it correlates the locations of the two. So, there's nothing definitive here. A lot of people can be mistaken. A lot of people, like myself, aren't real experienced in the woods. And so they can easily be mistaken and fooled by something with regards to something in the eyewitness world. And again, there's no real science behind collecting this data and analyzing it as well. And the fifth one, the one that I ran into, is this notion of vocalization. Yeah, I've heard some weird stuff out there in eastern Ohio. There's no doubt about it. And some of this has been analyzed. There's not a lot out there that is of really good quality and able to be analyzed. But the counter to that is, a lot of times animals can make sounds that we don't really and haven't discovered that they can make. known animals can make these kinds of sounds. Um, we certainly can be fooled by humans making some sounds out there as well. Technology, technical amplification, and things like that can also be out there. So again, there's nothing, and of course we have a culture, a Bigfoot culture, where people go out there yelling a lot and making these sounds, trying to attract the creature and so forth. And so again, nothing real definitive here as well. Now we get down to number 6 with regards to footprints. You might ask, well, how many do we have? And for example, Dr. Jeff Meldrum will say, well, he's got about, or at least he's been able to examine, I don't know if these are all in his collection or not. We're talking about 200 footprints. It's not real clear to me whether we're talking about footprints of the same kind or nature, or we're talking about 200 different ones. It's not real clear with regards to me, but that is at least claimed in terms of what he's been able to examine. I mentioned kind of the most intriguing one is the Bossburg, Washington State finding in 1969, just a few years after the Patterson-Gimlin film. Some of the things he'll point out, not only about the unusual pathology that exists in this footprint, but he'll mention what's called a mid-tarsal break, which is a break that a human foot does not have. Your foot doesn't break or bend right in the middle, but evidently some primates do have this, and it's theorized that Bigfoot might have this mid-tarsal break. And I guess in some of the footprints, not all of them, you see this pushing up of the dirt that is representative of this mid-tarsal break. Also, there are been found on some of these. This is also very rare, found on only a few of these footprints, or what is referred to as dermal ridges, like you have ridges that represent your fingerprint. You also have these on your feet. These are found in a vertical notion on the bottom of some of these casts. You have to have to have very fine soil that will pick it up, according to Meldrum, and to constitute this. Now, the counter to all of this is really the context of the Bossburg, Washington State cripplefoot. This I only find this in one of the interesting differences between Meldrum's book and Daegling's book is Daegling actually goes into the background and documents some of this background. He calls it the Bossburg incident, where even some of the advocates of Bigfoot questioned the finding of these tracks, questioned their location because they were near a road. They were near where there were known hoaxers of Bigfoot. Someone was claiming nearby that they had actually captured a Bigfoot during this time period in which these were found. He talks about the circumstances of the finding. This is something Meldrum completely ignores. Maybe he's aware of it, but his book doesn't bring it out. He's just interested in looking at the casts and examining them, or looking at the photographic image in the Patterson-Gimlin film, but not talking about the context of it. And so this is something that is ignored by a lot of advocates. But when you read something like Daegling's book, Bigfoot Exposed, he investigates the surroundings of it and brings up a lot of questions about it. A lot of these features, for example, you can find these pathologies in textbooks that easily could have been copied and put into a fake foot. The casting impressions themselves can result in some of the phenomenon that may look like dermal ridges. These dermal ridges aren't all over the feet. They're just in patches of it. He says the casting process itself could produce that. Sometimes the cleaning of the cast itself might produce certain things. What he basically says in the end is none of this footprint evidence, and for him, none of the evidence actually eliminates the possibility of human fabrication. And of course, that's the threshold of science, is if you're going to come forward as an advocate in putting forth this evidence, it's got to reach the level for science to pay attention to it, where you're actually able to eliminate human fabrication. And none of this evidence that I've gone through, whether it's the Native American tradition, Gigantopithecus, photographic eyewitness evidence, vocalizations, and footprints, none of it reaches the level of eliminating human fabrication. Now, the last one potentially could, and that's DNA. The problem is DNA that has been done on various samples In some cases, in most of the cases that I'm aware of, yields other known animals that exist. In a few of the cases, it has yielded something that is unknown, or what's referred to, sometimes it's labeled something that is a primate but non-human and so forth. But that doesn't automatically mean that we're dealing with a new creature that hasn't been discovered. The problem with DNA is the fact that you can only use DNA to match with something that is known with regards to DNA. In order to actually use DNA to establish the existence of a new creature, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about Sasquatch or some other animal that's never been discovered, the only way to do that is to map the entire genome. That is very expensive. That is a very long process, even to map a lot of it, to sequence this DNA and to come up with basically the entire map of the organism. If that is done for something that's brand new, and it is brand new, and it obviously doesn't match anything that's known to exist with regards to DNA, then you can establish something that scientists are going to pay attention to. But until that's done, and it has not been done, scientists really are not going to pay attention to this. So I know that was long, so thanks for bearing with me on that. But those 7 things are the things you're probably primarily going to run into for and against the existence of Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
All right, thanks. Yeah, those are really informative. So you had Native American tradition, Gigantopithecus, photographic evidence, eyewitness testimony, vocalizations, footprints, and DNA. And you mentioned one of those films that's very famous, the Patterson-Gimlin film. Can you tell us more about that? I've seen the film. It does, just for someone who doesn't know anything about this, it looks interesting and genuine. But tell us about that one.
Yeah, the Patterson-Gimlin film really kind of sparked the movement. Before that, you've got some known faking going on in the 1950s and some casts that are made, but it's really 1967 that I would say sparked what I would put forward as the modern fascination with Bigfoot that we are experiencing today, and hasn't seemed to die down. It actually seemed to have increased. As I mentioned before, this is probably the primary photographic evidence an advocate of Bigfoot would point themselves towards. In 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were actually out searching in Bluff Creek area, which is Northern California, for the creature. They got a report from another advocate of Bigfoot saying, hey, there are some tracks in Bluff Creek. Why don't you go down there and check it out? So it took them a while to get everything together. Went on horseback with another horse that held their equipment, went out into this area. Now, one of the things that needs to be brought out, first of all, they are looking for the creature. In fact, Roger Patterson has the interest of actually making a film about Bigfoot. Now, one side of the advocates would say, hey, he was only out there to actually film tracks. He didn't actually think he would be able to film a creature or something walking by. But so as it is there in Bluff Creek, you can see the film. It's out there on YouTube and in lots of places. It's actually probably hard to miss if anything is actually done with regards to Bigfoot. You can certainly see it. A lot of what I would call work has been done, and this is probably the most investigated film around. And there are individuals that have investigated, said it is someone in a costume walking by, and others that have investigated saying there is no way that is a human being in a costume walking by. The one thing they agree on, it is a real film that was not originally doctored in any way. No work was done on it to sketch things in or anything like that. This really is a film of something walking by. That's exactly what was filmed.
So let me stop you. So you mentioned that it could be somebody in a costume. Is it? I've heard that in fact, you said this, that the owner of Morris Costumes in Charlotte claims to have sold that outfit or whatever costume to Gimlin.
That's
one
of
Patterson or Gimlin.
That is that is one of the stories behind it.
Okay.
I would say one of the books that I read, I haven't mentioned this one, is a book by Greg Long called "The Making of Bigfoot." He's got a lot of criticism, which I'm sure he expected to get in writing the book. One of the things that he does in that book is he really investigates the life of Roger Patterson in particular. He interviews people that knew him. And there are two things I came away with that book that I think are indisputable based on his investigative type reporting. Number one, Bob Gimlin um, uh, has the what I would say has the motivation to fake something like this. I think that's just undeniable. Whether he did or not, he certainly has the motivation to do it. He intended to get to make money off of this. He wasn't sure how much he could really get, but he certainly had the intention, the plan, and so forth to make money off of this. The second thing I would say is he definitely had the ingenuity to pull something off like this in terms of him getting pictures of it in the way that he did, making a suit like that. And one of the stories, and yeah, the documentation is in Greg Long's book. If anyone wants to take a look at it, The Making of Bigfoot, that at least the owner and founder of Morris Costumes said and produced a receipt that he actually talked to Roger on the phone, gave testimony to that, and said that he sold him one of his gorilla costumes. And of course, he said, I didn't tell anybody for years and years because my whole business is built upon being quiet about what I sell to magicians and other people that are doing shows and so forth. His whole business is built upon not revealing what he sells to people. But he says he eventually came out with the receipt and so forth, saying that he did. And you can, of course, read about that in Greg Long's book. But whether he did or whether he didn't, to come back on the side of Jeff Meldrum and give his side, you got to deal with what's in the film, regardless of the context. And this is one of the problems I have with Dr. Meldrum in his book is he doesn't give you this full context that Dave Daegling does give you regarding the film, or even the context that Greg Long's book gives you. That you can't study something, as we know in scriptural studies, you don't study a text out of context. That's a big no-no. And yes, you don't want to study a Bigfoot event, whether it's film, vocalization, or whatever you got going, outside of the context of what went on before, what went on during, and what went on after. Is all this context needs to give us a greater appreciation to understand what's going on here. So all of that being said, there are a few things that it's interesting that Daegling points out, and then Meldrum actually responds in his book to it, and then there's actually another response that I'll give you in a review of Meldrum's book that Dave Daegling was involved in writing. That's kind of a counter to that, so you can actually get a feel for some of the debate that goes on with regards to this issue. One of the things that Dr. Daegling points out with regards to the creature is he'll say, for example, the crest of the head. Obviously, this is, if you look closely at the film, it's a female Sasquatch allegedly walking by, and the head is this crest. But a crest head only applies to males; it doesn't apply to females. So the head's wrong. Another thing that he'll point out with regards to this is if you look at one of the pics of the film, it's got a number. I don't remember the number, but one of the feet is up, and you actually see the sole of the foot. And one of the things that's very clear, although you got to look really close, is the fact that the surface of the foot is extended beyond the heel, beyond the Achilles heel, making it look like we're talking about a pad with regards to this, which is something that Daegling says you're not going to see that in any living creature. You're not going to see a pad that extends beyond the back heel, extending beyond the leg of the creature. So he'll point things like this out in the film. Now, Meldrum's got answers to this. He says, well, The crest isn't really related to male or femaleness. It's related to body ratio and size and so forth. It's related more to that. And when you're dealing with the big creature, even the like Sasquatch, even the crest might be part of the female species, or might be part of the Sasquatch species for the females. So things are said like this, and he's even got an explanation with regards to why, for a large creature like Sasquatch, you would actually need the Achilles to work with an overhang with regards to the heel. So he's got answers with regards to that. I'm in no position. I'm not an anthropologist to settle this one. They're going to have to settle this, but it kind of shows the detail that this gets into, the stuff that you're not going to see this in documentaries. You're not going to see this on your TV show with regards to it, or even a reporting with regards to it. This is something that probably couldn't even be settled unless you actually discover the creature itself and examine it. But at least these anthropologists are in disagreement over it. Now, there's just a few other things I'll mention about it. Number one, that you might think, hey, if we could solve this, we would know, but in fact, you can't. Some would say the gait. The gait is so unusual with the legs bent, and that a human could not reproduce that gait. Some will say that you actually see muscles kind of bulking and bulging underneath it, and they would say, suit certainly wouldn't have stuff like that. Some would say, look, the height is out of the range of a human height, that especially he wouldn't have been able to get someone to put the suit on, or the suit wouldn't fit and so forth. Well, the problem is other analysts have looked at this, and work has been done, and even Dave Daegling has done some work to say, no, a human can match this gait. He did some work and some research to show that you can. It's awkward, but it can be matched. A lot of work has gone into the height. You would think that's something easy to get, but it's not, because it's not completely known. Some of the distances and actually the film speed is in question. You've got to know these factors to really gauge the height. But some of the most recent work that I've read about, and not in detail, has basically reported that it's not outside the range of human height. It's around 6'2", 6'3", and so forth with regards to the height. So those types of things, and obviously bulking muscles and so forth. Some would say, look, you can create some of this, at least with regards to stuffing the costume itself and so forth. So again, there's nothing definitive one way or the other with regards to this. I'll just point out two other things that are really never brought up in at least I've never seen a documentary or any TV special or anything bring these two things up. And Meldrum admits this about it as well. The footprints that were cast, there's a handful of them, I forget the exact number, that were cast a couple days after the episode took place. Some returned to the site and made some casts of the footprints were there, and the feet are very static. They don't show a lot of motion with regards to them. They don't have dermal ridges. There's only one that has this mid-tarsal break that's representative in it. Most of the other ones are just very static type prints, which are easily faked. The other thing that's interesting is that both Meldrum and Daegling mentioned this, but I've never seen anybody else mention it. One of the things that the partner of Roger Patterson, Bob Gimlin, did is he tried to produce the impressions in the soil a little bit after this episode took place. I think it was not immediate, but he tried to reproduce in the soil the impressions that they were able to take photographs of and take castings of the prints by jumping off of a stump. And Daegling takes this and says, "Hey, this is actually kind of interesting. This actually gives us math to work with, because we know Bob's weight at the time he gives us to it, and we know the height of the stump, and we know what it took in terms of jumping for him to actually make the impression." And so he does some calculations. Again, I'm not good in math, but he's got this laid out in his book if you want to check his math on this. And he comes to the conclusion that for the creature to have made the impressions that are claimed with regards to on-site photos and castings that were done, that creature needed to weigh 3,800 pounds, according to the math of what it took Gimlin to make the same impression. And he says, well, no one is claiming that creature in the film is 3,800 pounds. No one claims, as far as I know, anywhere. You're talking about claims of weights up to 300, maybe 400 pounds, depending on height, maybe up to close to 1,000. But no one is saying that this creature is 3,800 pounds. But that's what the math gives us. That type of thing, as well as the context, regardless of whatever else you might say about it, when you throw it all together, you're going to have to come through and say and come to a conclusion that says this cannot be counted as definitive. And that's definitely where I stand.
Well, thanks for all the information there. It's a lot of information. Okay. So if there's some kind of real phenomena there, what could we say it is? What are the possibilities for the explanations for what in the world is going on here?
Yeah. What in the world is going on here? Given that your channel is on classic theology, I won't make a defense of being a theist, and I won't make a defense of being a Christian, but understand that's the context in which I have a worldview in which I look at everything. I think that a worldview, of course, is defendable, and I'm sure you will do some work on actually defending that theistic context, but that's really where I approach it. So when I approach it from that way and in that context, looking at the evidence, of course, in that context, there's a few things I think you can come up with. Number one, things could be hoaxed. Indeed, there is hoaxing that has been found. And it's really important to keep in mind that the Bigfoot community, and it is a community, it is a culture, or we might say a subculture. In some areas of the country, it's very strong. In other areas of the country, you wouldn't even hear of it, but it does exist. And in that culture, you have the advocates for it. We might say they like to call themselves researchers of Bigfoot. That to me is hard. How can you research that hasn't been something that hasn't been established, but nonetheless, that's what they like to be called. Within that culture, there are known hoaxers. So there's people advocating for the investigation of it that are the very same individuals that are known to hoax, in some cases suspected of hoaxing. In one instance, is you kind of the red flag goes up with, for example, an individual that's passed away, Paul Freeman, who initially provided tracks for Jeff Meldrum to see and really got him hooked on it, saying these are real. And even other Bigfoot advocates said, how come Freeman finds all this stuff? How come he goes out there and he finds tracks and he finds evidence, he finds hairs? How does he do that? Because there's other researchers, so to speak, out there, and they don't find very much at all. And it takes a long time before they even find anything. So there's some suspicion there with regards to it. So the same community that gives us the evidence is also filled with individuals, sometimes the same individuals that give us the evidence, that are known to be involved in the hoaxing. So that's obviously one possible explanation. Another one that we've mentioned is they're just mistaken. Look, there are, the correlated study of bear sightings with Sasquatch sightings has been done. That exists. And believe it or not, people let exotic pets go into the wild of North America. It's very conceivable and known that certain monkeys have been let loose into the wild. They live for a while. It's possible humans come in contact with them and make mistakes with regards to it, identifying them. If you walked into your woods or sometime you go camping and ran into a monkey, you'd probably be quite surprised. And also you have to take into account that people can be so focused on this issue of Sasquatch, so interested in it, that they themselves kind of desire such an experience. It elevates them in the culture to a higher level when you've actually had an experience seeing it, so they can actually somehow think that they really have experienced it. In other words, they actually have this illusory type experience. This is also an explanation with regards to it. It's something that psychologically can be produced, that people that really, really want something and want to be recognized in a community, this could be there. Obviously, people can just lie. I mean, that's another observation. Um, and also, this is related to my worldview that your channel defends. So I won't defend it here. But I think, as we mentioned before, when and Scripture backs me up on this as well, when belief regarding when belief about and actually practicing the occult is involved, or people are involved in it in a certain way in which they incorporate getting connected with nature, or getting connected with what is in nature. And of course, this involves a Sasquatch, or at least what they believe to be a Sasquatch. This indeed creates an environment where I think it's right for a Christian to assert the fact that there could be behind some of what is going on demonic activity, demonic manifestations, demonic work that is going on. Now, I don't know how you think about this, Brian, but I hold the position that demons don't create bodies. I hold that demons can certainly possess human beings and animals, but they're not about creating bodies. I know there are instances in Scripture where good angels inhabit a body and meet with Abraham and so forth. This is in the Old Testament quite a bit. But this is only attributed to good angels, and it's only attributed, and it may not be something that's true of all angels. I don't attribute it because I don't see it represented in Scripture, either explicitly or implicitly, that demons actually have this power to create bodies that would be representative of something like a monster or something like that, or in your case, since you study UFOs, aliens or things like that. But they can certainly do a lot in terms of the manipulation of matter. They can possess people, and they can possess animals. And those animals that they possess, they could certainly take to a level of creating very unusual sounds with regards to them, or directing them to do things that they normally would not do in their natural environment. This is a possibility, and this is something that is borne out in terms of what Scripture presents us. So when, and this is an important qualification, when the occult involvement is going on, this is a possible explanation for some of the phenomenon. I would not put that as out of the realm of possibility. Now, I would just conclude this kind of question with this one area, and you've got to understand, and I've talked about this, this is in the context of a Bigfoot culture or subculture that has existed for 50 plus years. They have not been able to produce evidence that completely eliminates the possibility of human fabrication, and they really haven't been able to produce anything different than the lines of evidence that I've already given over the 50 years. Now, you would think, for example, if the greatest comparison I can make is in the 1800s, gorillas were discovered. And it started with eyewitness accounts of gorillas. And then it progressed where they were actually able to bring pieces of bone and bone with regards to the gorilla to the scientists. And it was at that point that the scientists said, we need to take a look at this. And they did. Bigfoot has not gone in that direction. It has stayed stagnant for 50 plus years, and they haven't been able to produce anything that is known with regards to teeth, bone, body parts, or body, which is the kind of progression you would expect for a real species that is out there. So given that fact and understanding that as the context, I think those are the most viable explanations. There's certainly maybe variants of those, but I think those pretty much hold up as possible explanations.
All right, thanks for the answer. I appreciate that. A lot of good information there. There's a lot of similarity with that between Bigfoot and how you describe the possibilities of what it could be with UFOs. Lie, hoax, misidentification. Pretty much every point you made in one way or another can be very likened to how we explain UFOs, which is really weird and interesting, given both those phenomena. So, how should Christians deal with this? If they want to investigate it, if they want to learn more about it, are there good ways? Because even people like John Keel, for example, with UFOs, say be careful; it can suck you in, and it'll be very deceitful. So, would you say the same thing about Bigfoot in that regard?
Yeah, I would. Sometimes I've actually been asked, should I go on this Bigfoot expedition? Wouldn't that be fun to do? I've always wanted to do something like that. Christians have asked about that. Um, uh, my uh, my answer is, in general, don't get involved, don't get sucked into something like that. First of all, I think it's pretty much a waste of time. Even if it does exist, the chances that you're going to run into it are pretty slim. And as I kind of laid out here, you realize that I lean towards the position of the fact that it does not exist unless some new, really good, substantial evidence. I'm certainly open to new evidence comes along. So in general, if don't do these trips. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. Certainly go into the outdoors, but this is not something you need to have a focus on at all. Enjoy the great outdoors. Enjoy the creation of God. Absolutely. But in general, no, there's no reason to do this. I would give one possible exception if, for example, new information, new evidence came to light that sparked the anthropological world, and they put together a research team, and you have the credentials to be on that team, to go out and go look, and it's got a direct objective associated with it that may, of course, be related to finding out information based on new evidence. Then yeah, if you're backed financially by such a research operation or team, I wouldn't have and you're a believer, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But just for recreational purposes or other things, I would say no. There's no reason to be out there in the woods doing. There's plenty of other things to devote your time to in the woods. Searching for Bigfoot is just not one that should be on your list with regards to that. Yeah, that's pretty much my advice. If you want to look into this, I've mentioned the books. Yeah, I think you'll have a link, or at least describe the books there. The one by Meldrum, if you want a pro book, and the one by Daegling, if you want a counter to that, I think is a good place to start. I don't think you need to go much more beyond that at all.
Is it okay to visit the museums? For example, there's a museum up in North Georgia where I am sometimes up there for various things. Is it okay to go to those kind of museums or to watch the shows just for fun, or are you saying to stay away from it completely?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've probably watched more Bigfoot shows on TV than is healthy for any one individual. I've never been to a museum, and
I went to the gift shop. I went to the gift shop. I haven't been inside the museum yet.
Yeah, shop or whatever. Yeah, exactly. How can you have a museum of something that hasn't been shown to exist? Yeah, whatever it is. I've not been to one. No, I'm not going to take some, the fun of watching something for entertainment purposes away from you, or going to a shop for entertainment purposes. But you do need to be careful in terms of how involved you are. You need to, I was talking about, when I did years ago, when I did work on UFOs, and eventually kind of, I guess, passed the mantle to you because I was done with it. But one of the things that was continuously brought up was we need to have, as believers, a healthy suspension of disbelief with regards to these particular issues. And as long as you've got that healthy suspension of, or established this notion of, I disbelieve this, I think for a certain extent you're okay. But once you get rid of that, and once you do away with that suspension of, once you suspend that notion of disbelief, you could be on a dangerous path if you think, with regard, whether it's UFOs or Bigfoot or whatever, a path you go down that could get darker and darker and darker in terms of experience and things that might happen to you, people you might run into. And so you need to be very cautious and careful of that. again, that's why I think it's important to read on both sides of an issue, whether it's UFOs or whatever the paranormal issue is. There are plenty of Christians that have written on UFOs that have done a really good job. And I would say that there's some good books that are very skeptical and articles that are very skeptical about Bigfoot and so forth. And if you haven't looked at those, you need to, because that's where you get down to the really good stuff in terms of content. And if all you're feeding yourself is, well, people that you talk to that say they've run into Sasquatch out there, or the TV shows that are just about entertainment, and most of the documentaries are about entertainment too, then you really have not had a good exposure to information that you need to be exposed to.
All right. So I've already kind of given in some of my other talks why I think Bigfoot maybe shows up with UFOs and all that kind of stuff. Sure. Why do you think that there's this connection between Bigfoot and UFOs and paranormal and poltergeist type stuff?
Yeah, the Bigfoot phenomenon. I think you need to describe it a phenomenon in the sense that it's impressive in terms of the people and what's involved in what they talk about and what they do. It's a phenomenon, and on one extreme of one side of the phenomenon, you've got a handful of anthropologists that think, hey, science needs to dig into this. There's really something there. And you've got others that counter them as well, that the majority of anthropologists that kind of counter them. Now, on the other side, you've got the extreme. You've got the UFO advocates. And one thing that they think or believe about Bigfoot is that Bigfoot transcends normal animal behavior. Once you buy into something like that, you're going down the path of not only pseudoscience, but you're going down the path of the occult and the paranormal that leads into the occult. And so once you go into that realm, there's this emphasis, I think, within the world of the occult to interconnect everything. That, okay, you've got this one unknown thing over here, UFOs, aliens, whatever. You got this other unknown thing over here, Bigfoot. Let's unify them. Bigfoot does unusual things. UFOs are unusual. Aliens are unusual. So let's just kind of connect. And it's kind of the human psyche that wants to look for a common cause, common source, common connection, or common correlation of all these things that are unknown, weird, unusual, and so forth. That's just a tendency of the movement itself to do things like that.
What everyone's probably wondering is, so what do you think Bigfoot is? You've given us all these different, you kind of already hinted at this, so you think it's probably not really there. But with all the possibilities you've given us with your own experience, what do you think's actually going on with a lot of these sightings?
I'm definitely on the skeptical side of the fence for sure. But it is a cultural phenomenon. You can't deny that. There are, as I've mentioned before, people are involved in. If you look at this, the culture does its own conferences that are held throughout the United States. Everything that's associated with the conference, from books, T-shirts, mugs, all kinds of stuff that goes into it. This is and as well as going out in the woods and trying to have an experience with Sasquatch, all goes into the conference. That's a very real element of this that can't be ignored. And we've already kind of talked about, the positions with regards to people on there. Given that we're talking about 50, 60 years of a lot of evidence, but it's not really good evidence. And that being the case, I don't deny that such a creature is possible. In fact, most scientists would say the environment could support it. Most scientists, I think, would say, we don't have an objection to the idea of such a thing. In the past, there have been hominids that approach something like a Bigfoot that have all gone extinct, and they would say it's possible. The problem is it's not very probable, and science isn't going to just deal with what's possible. Otherwise, they're going to be all over the place and wasting their resources and money.
Right.
Something has to come forward that makes it much more likely, much more probable than the existing evidence that's been put forward. The other thing I would say that drives me to the skeptical side of it is the context of all of this, where you've got this community, even going back to the 1960s, you have this community where the same people that are producing the evidence are suspected of hoaxing it. And that exists all the way through to today. And as I've mentioned, none of this evidence that's been put forward eliminates the possibility of human fabrication. So I am open, but I certainly am not going to spend an inordinate amount of money, time, and resources pursuing the reality of this, because I don't think it's real. The evidence doesn't support it being a real animal. Therefore, I accept that the explanations as I've given you here in terms of the con, probably in my mind, in my estimation, actually win the argument. And therefore, I don't think there's anything real to the creature in terms of being an animal.
Well, that's all very interesting. I appreciate you being on the show, Doug. Thank you for being my first interviewee. We had to endure some technical problems to figure all this out. So thank you very much for enduring with me and for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. I hope everyone enjoyed that. I will put Doug's link to his YouTube channel in the description, as well as the resources he's alluded to. So I hope you enjoyed the show. Please check out Doug's channel, and we'll see you next time. Oh, I didn't hit record. Gotcha.
Is that a planned blooper?
Yeah.